Hello, it is Shay, Madeline here. Welcome back to my channel. I know it has been a while since I have recorded a video, especially one with a voiceover in it. But I am really genuinely excited to get back into YouTube now that it is summer and I have a lot more free time. So in this video, as you can probably tell from the title, I actually drew a handful of drawings for my boyfriend, and I'm excited to show you how they turned out and what all I drew today for you. Okay, so jumping right into it, you can see I have collected a few references for this drawing, and if you can't tell based on my references, I am going to be drawing a female elf for this drawing. And the reasoning behind this choice of race and gender is that my boyfriend at the time that I was drawing these drawings was making a website for D&D and specifically for like our own friend group to use during our D&D campaigns. And so I decided, and well, we both decided together, that it would be cool if there were like generic drawings of each race and each gender to be like fill-ins before anybody who used the website would fill in their own character. But then at least if they picked like a female elf to be the player that they wanted to play at during their D&D campaign, then they would have something already there. But ultimately, in the end, I did only actually end up drawing 3 drawings for this little series that I had started, and that's because he lost interest in his project with that website, and then in the end, I lost interest with my own little series that I had started. But I am pretty happy with how my 3 drawings turned out. I got 2 elves drawn, 1 girl and 1 boy, and then I started drawing the dwarves. I drew the male dwarf, but then I had issues drawing the female dwarf, and that's kind of what made me lose motivation. But like I said, I am very happy with the 3 drawings that you will see today in this video. So as you can see now, I have finished the line art for this drawing and I'm moving on to the coloring. So I am just laying down the base colors to begin with. And if you look, you can tell that I did pull a lot of inspiration from the references around me. The pose and hairstyle, for example, was strongly pulled from that picture on the right. But then the outfits were designed by the 2 pictures on the left. For example, like the corset leathery thing that she has going on is definitely inspired by that drawing on the bottom left, as well as the color scheme. And then the sleeves that she has were inspired from that drawing on the top left, which that might be kind of a weird outfit she has going on altogether, but I do like it in the end, even if it is a little bit not like actually useful. But yeah, when I did start rendering, I think the hardest part for me to render was the face, and I still think even to today I have issues rendering faces. I don't know if it's just because I haven't done a whole lot of like studying of the anatomy of a face, or if I still just need to understand lighting a little bit more, the planes of the face, but I definitely struggle, and I feel like all of my drawings, besides maybe the dwarf, had a little bit of an ugly phase as I tried to figure out exactly how I wanted to render and draw their faces. But in the end, I do think that she turned out pretty good. And at this point in time, even though at this point this was months ago that I drew these drawings, she was definitely the best drawing I had drawn and like shown to the internet at this time in history, I suppose. So I was very, very proud of her. But now looking at it, I can see so many little issues that I would change. So I'm excited when I get to more of my recent arts in my videos and I can show you how much I've grown even since then. I also do think, despite the fact that I wish I had been able to post and make voiceover videos throughout the school year, I am kind of happy that able to have this opportunity now to look back on these old pieces of art and really see how much I have grown and actually show that to you guys in a more succinct way. So I think that'll be really cool to do because then I can kind of comment on what I would have maybe done differently. Like for example, when drawing her outfit, I wish I would have paid attention to the fact that materials, when you like think about outfits and clothing and how fabric works, they have mass to them. And I kind of have her clothes just sticking perfectly to her body. I would have definitely changed that and given it more like ruffles and whatnot to just show that these are like real pieces of fabric and they do have actual like physics behind them. So yeah, that's something I think I've improved on a lot since this drawing. But that also is not at all to say that I am not proud of this piece, because I still, looking back on this one specifically of these 3 that I draw in this video, this is one that I put a lot of time and effort into, and I really feel like it has some of like my best rendering that I've done and a lot of like attention to detail because I did draw this over a winter break actually. So I had a lot of time to put into like drawing little lines here and there to make like the leather look like leather and really putting thought behind like the shadows in the fabric. So I am very, very happy with how this turned out, especially the clothes. But as always with any art piece, there is still critiquing to be done so it can help further improve my future art pieces. Drawing fantasy art too is something that I really enjoy and want to get better at. So that was another cool thing that I got to do with this little series is really start to kind of explore like my own rendering style and how maybe I might go about making future fantasy art and how much detail or like the way I want the line art to work out. But overall, this was a really good little series for me to figure out a lot about my own style and how I want to go about drawing from here on out. But anyways, I am starting to near the end of this drawing as I hope you can tell. Her rendering is just about done and she has a background color that I think goes well with her. So now we will begin to move on to the male elf drawing that I did. So again, to begin this drawing, I did begin by gathering references once again, and I think I actually pulled that reference on the right from the same artist that had the right side reference for my last drawing as well. And one thing with him that I really wanted to focus on, which is why I brought her in, was making sure that he had the same style and kind of a similar feel as she did because they are meant to be part of the same website and so therefore they should have like the same style as they're both just placeholder pictures. And I wanted them to look somewhat similar but not so similar that they almost just looked like the female and male version of the same person. I still wanted them to like have their own differences. So you'll see how I did that a little bit later in the drawing. But one thing to be said is that I definitely did struggle with him, especially his face, a lot more than I struggled with her. I don't know what it is, but I have always seemed to struggle with drawing like men. And I don't know if it's just because I tend to draw a lot more females just naturally, maybe it's because I am a girl, but I really struggled with making his face like look not super duper weird. And I think at the end I do kind of figure it out, but I really struggled with this one. Like he has for a while a pretty bad ugly stage, but you will see that it kind of works out in the end. But I do kind of think the only reason why I was able to make it work out is because I did kind of follow that reference on the right a little bit too closely, in my opinion. I think I drew from that color scheme, especially with the skin and hair colors, which you can't tell now, but you'll be able to tell later. I pulled from it a little bit too much, so I would like to say if I were to redraw this, I would like to almost get rid of that reference completely after I had started drawing like the colors and had just done all the coloring on my own because I am a little bit disappointed in myself for pulling so heavily from someone else's piece of art. Then I guess if I were to focus once again on like what I could learn from this series that I had tried drawing is I could definitely practice like male anatomy, especially like male faces because faces like I said before I already do struggle a lot with, but drawing a man's face for whatever reason has it just sometimes just drives me insane and I just cannot figure it out. So I think if I were to pull anything away from this drawing, it would definitely be to not rely so heavily on references and also to practice like facial anatomy before I really jump into the drawing, which I say that now, and I have drawn a lot of drawings since then, and I still keep putting off drawing like facial anatomy or like practicing facial anatomy, but I do think with every drawing I do that like it gets a little bit better. So in its own way, like every drawing is another practice, but it would not hurt me to sit down one day and just do like a few sketches here and there to kind of figure it out. But I will say at this point, I feel like he looks so much better than he did a little bit ago. I do think that the orangey yellow like skin and color scheme like is a cool scheme, especially for like an elf. And it kind of gives him his own look that like he is very similar to her in terms of like color scheme of like the clothes and the outfit itself. But his skin and hair is a lot different, so I think that's a cool way to like differentiate. They almost look like different like sub races of elves, and I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, so he is also being pretty close to done at this point. I think my biggest takeaways from him are to practice facial anatomy as well as I did not put a lot of effort into his outfit, and I wish I would have, so that's another takeaway. But overall, I am happy with him, and I'm really excited to show you my next drawing, because my next drawing is drawing a male dwarf, and I think he turned out pretty cool. And at this point, I'm sure you can already guess, I once again drew from some references, as well as I have her once again in the bottom right corner, so I can try and get the stylization pretty similar because I'm sure if you know me and my art, you know I tend to draw with a lot of different styles for whatever reason, and it's hard for me to like stick to one consistent style. So it's important for me to like have something to reference for style in that bottom right corner. And as you can see, I took a lot of inspiration once again from a reference for the pose. I am inspired by that person on the left. I think he's a really cool looking dwarf, so I followed that maybe once again a little bit too closely, which I swear since these drawings I have gotten better at not following any references too closely. But here is his line art being drawn right now, and I will say I feel like his line art is really well done, if not the best of the three drawings. I decided to put his whole body in this drawing instead of just like his upper bust like I did with the other two, because he's a dwarf and I feel like seeing the whole body like makes sense because he's going to be a lot shorter than elves because I feel like elves tend to be on the taller end. So it kind of helps show his race, as well as I feel like dwarves' armor and how they dress and their weapons are like a pretty big part of who they are. So I wanted to include his whole body for that reason. But yeah, I think his line art turns out really cool in the end. As you can see, I drew like little scales and little chainmail here and there. So he actually probably took the longest to draw because his line art alone took me a few days. Even though I used a few tips and tricks here and there to try and like copy stuff over so I didn't have to redraw everything. But I feel like in the future, something I would be interested in doing after drawing this drawing, I think it'd be cool to make like a coloring book where I do line art that's like of this level that you'll see with him, and I put it into a coloring book, and then maybe people will be interested in like buying something like that. I'm not sure, but to me it kind of seems like a cool idea, especially because it would be cool to like have something published out there. But yeah, if you are at all interested in that, just let me know and I will consider it. But his art so far in this video has only been line art. His color is coming up really soon though, which I think I did struggle with his coloring a little bit, not a whole lot, but like the rendering process specifically is what I kind of struggled with, especially like his face once again. But I don't know if it had to do with how he was drawn or if it was just like me figuring out like what colors worked the best. But in the end, I am really happy with how he turned out. I decided for him, instead of doing like the green and brown kind of color scheme and like purple I had going on with the elves, that I wanted to have him be like blue and gray and those types of colors, so kind of like cooler colors. And I think that works out well because I feel like the armor, is going to be like gray and silvery, so blue goes well with that. And when he's rendered, he, in my opinion, turns out really cool. So I'm excited for you guys to see that point. But something I wanted to keep consistent a little bit was having a little bit of leather on all of them. Like the female elf, as you can see in the bottom right corner, has like that leather corset. And then the male elf, I think, had like a leather belt. And he has like this male dwarf, or this male dwarf, he has this leather belt and like sash thing in the front, as well as the cape obviously he has, which is that blue cape in the back, which is much longer than the other two's, but still gives like a similar vibe, which I think helps keep the styles more consistent, even if I rendered them slightly differently, because I feel like by him, I had like figured out how I like to render it a tad bit more, because I had been like, I had 20 more hours of experience, so things are probably a little bit differently, but I think it's still consistent enough that I consider these three to be in the same style. But anyways, that is a lot of incoherent yapping just to say that I am happy with how he turned out and I feel like the styles overall match. But he is getting really close to being done, as I'm sure you can tell. I really focused on making sure that his darks were really dark and his brights were really bright, especially like on the metals and stuff, which I feel like you can see a lot more with this dark background. If I were to change anything about him, I would have made the background a little bit lighter for readability purposes. I feel like right now he's kind of blending in a bit too much, or maybe I'd make him just overall brighter. And also, if you notice, his right hand actually has 6 fingers, so I did go back and change that, but it is kind of crazy how long it took me to notice that. But I am nearing the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to check out some of my other content. Bye bye.